Welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Baseball, right here on WWBG 1470 AM. We're also on WTOB 980 AM and 96.7 FM. We are on all different networks, folks. We want to thank everybody on all our Tobacco Road Sports radio networks for being on and listening to this show as well today. We have a great show for you today. We're going to talk Wake Forest baseball. Unfortunately, not great news. We're going to also later on in the show have the great super agent Leigh Steinberg, and also from WFAN on air sports personality Evan Roberts. So an unbelievable show. Want to start off by thanking all the different groups on social media as well, listening to us as well. Some of them include, but are not limited to, Real Baseball Talk on Facebook, Baseball Talk, BASports.com, Baseball Life, Baseball Away Life, and Traditional Baseball Fans. All those groups are great groups if you want to get your baseball fix. Ladies and gentlemen, it was hyped. It was publicized. It was supposed to be the pitching duel of the century. And you know what? It lived up to its billing. What a game. Unfortunately, it didn't go Wake Forest's way. They lose in 11 innings on a 2-run homer, walk-off homer by Tommy White of LSU. But, folks, it was all about the pitching in this game. You know, it was Rhett Lauder for us. It was Paul Skeens for LSU. Two of the best pitchers in all of college baseball. I think Lauder is number 9 on the MLB draft pick. And right now they're expecting Skeens possibly to be number 1. But both of these guys were magnificent. And I'll say it again. They were magnificent. Paul Skeens pitched 8 scoreless innings, striking out 9. Lauder was equally as good as he went an impressive 7 scoreless innings, striking out 6. But this was a game, folks. We knew it was going to come down to pitching. We also knew Wake Forest was struggling on offense. They did again. I think they only got 3 hits in the 11 innings and only had 1 opportunity to score, but that was nullified in the top of the 8th inning when Trey Morgan, the first baseman, made an unbelievable play on a squeeze bunt attempt, going ahead, throwing it to home, and negating the run from being scored by the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Then, obviously, the game remained scoreless. Both bullpens were great. The pitching in general was great. But you got to, take it with a grain of salt. Wake Forest, number 1 hitting team, number 1 power team in all of college baseball, offensively did not show up in this tournament. They only had scored 8 runs in 4 games. That's an average of 2 runs a game. It's not good enough and wasn't good enough. But what a year. What a year this team had. It was miraculous. It was exciting. It was amazing. They did everything the fans could have hoped for and more. They ended the season with the number 1 ranking in all of college baseball. They had a great team. Brock Wilson broke a record for most home runs in a season. In a career in the ACC. We saw last night Lauder going ahead and getting most strikeouts at 141 in a season for Wake Forest. Lots of good things happen. This is a program that you should be proud of. Don't be upset, folks. I know we're upset. We wanted to win the College World Series. This is a team that has not been there since 1955, and they got all the way to 1 game away from making the finals against the Florida Gators, which brings up the Gators and LSU. We'll talk about those at another time. But once again, a great season by Wake Forest. Just a great year. They were 52-10. 52-10. Nothing to be ashamed of. LSU, give them credit. They had to play us 3 times. They lost the first game to us to start the tournament. And then what they have to do, they had to win 2 of 2 games versus us to win, and they did. Give credit where credit is due. They have a great, great team, a great power team like us. Very similar team to Wake Forest. Would not be surprised if they go on to beat Florida in the College World Series, which starts this Saturday. But once again, I'm proud of the guys. They played well. And like I said, I have nothing but great things to say about Wake Forest. And I'm very, very happy that here at Tobacco Road Sports Radio and Sports Carolina Monthly, that we had an opportunity to cover them. Reminder, you can read all different articles on Sports Carolina Monthly, including articles by myself talking about Wake Forest and talking about last night's game. Go to sportscarolinamonthly.com. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, congratulations to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons being number 1 in the country. Unfortunately, they were eliminated, but we are proud of you, and I know the entire Triad area is proud of you as well. Let's go ahead. Let's move on. Let's talk some Major League Baseball. I'm going to see if I can get a couple things going here. The hottest team in Major League Baseball by far. They have not lost since the last time we did a show. Even before that is the Cincinnati Reds. They are now in first place by a game and a half. That's right. The Cincinnati Reds. That's right. The team that lost 100 games last year is in first place in the NL Central. Can you believe it? What a streak they are. Listen to some of these numbers, folks. The Reds are on an 11-game winning streak. They are 11-2. Listen to this. 11-2 since Ellie De La Cruz has joined the team. He has been a spark in every single area. He got this team fired up. There's not a lot of big names on this team, but they keep winning. I think besides Joey Votto and Jonathan India, you won't even know any names. But what do they keep doing? David Bell has this team playing, and he has them playing hard. They don't hit a lot of home runs. They got 2 guys that have 10 home runs or double-digit home runs on the year, and they both have 10 home runs. I believe it's India and Spencer Steer, who's having a great year as well. But other than that, the key to them winning, we talked about it on many, many shows. It's not home runs, folks. It's getting on base, and they are 5th in the major league. 5th in the major leagues in on-base percentage, and they are scoring every which way possible. Right now, the Reds are 40-35. I mentioned they're on an 11-game winning streak. They swept 3 straight 3-game series and have won 5 consecutive series in a row. Okay, this is their largest winning streak. Now, remember, folks, we're talking about some great teams of the 80s. How about the Big Red Machine in 1975? But do you know this is the longest winning streak? I found it hard to believe since 1957 for the Cincinnati Reds. Amazing, amazing, and amazing. Now, we mentioned Ellie De La Cruz, but listen to some of these names that are having incredible years. Matt McClain's batting .313, 3 homers, 50 RBIs. How about Jake Fraley, who went off the other night? Batting .270, 9 homers, 44 RBIs. We're not even at the All-Star break yet. Spencer Steer, I mentioned. He has 10 ding-dong diggity-dongs with 40 RBIs. And TJ Friedel, 320, 4, what's he have? I think he has 4 homers, 27 RBIs. And you want to know the amazing thing about this Cincinnati Reds team, folks? They're doing it without starting pitching. They have no starting pitcher. Both Ashcraft and Green are hurt. They are left with 2 starting pitchers. They brought up the young kid, Andrew Abbott, who had a rough outing versus Colorado the other night, but he's 3-0 with a 1.14 ERA. That's right, 1.14 ERA. They do have Ben Lively, who's 4-4. That's also a starting pitcher, but it's been the bullpen. This is an incredible, incredible, incredible bullpen that David Bell has. He has Ian Jabbar. He's 8-1, 2.31 ERAs. How about Alexis Diaz? 20 saves on the season. That's right. They also got I believe it's Buck Farmer, Lucas Sims, Alex Young, all under 3.0 ERAs. This team is winning it by having a solid bullpen and getting timely hits, not home runs, timely hits, playing great defense and great pitching. That's what wins. And don't look for this team to slow down, folks. The one thing about young kids winning is they gain confidence and they don't believe they can lose. And that's what's going on in Cincinnati right now. And you had Joey Votto back to the mix. He came back, a couple days ago, hit a home run in his first game back. That's the leadership they need in that clubhouse. I mean, they're in a division that's not strong. Not strong at all. They're in the Central Division. What do they got? Milwaukee out there? Maybe Pittsburgh? I don't even know who the heck they have out there anymore. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you what, this Cincinnati Reds team is a team to be reckoned with. They're almost half the year up in first place in the NL Central. Now, folks, I mentioned to you that we have a terrific show for you today. We have a show. We have two great interviews that are coming up in the next two segments. The first one, obviously, is going to be Leigh Steinberg. He's a super agent. Had a movie that was McGuire was actually done and took over for represented what he was or who he was. Just a great thing. We're going to talk to Leigh. We're going to talk to him about, the NBA draft was last night, right? We have the NHL draft coming up next week. We have the MLB draft that was just a couple weeks ago. We thought it was a good time to bring Leigh in, talk about what does an agent do, and talk about what it takes to write some contracts. Then in the third segment, folks, we have Evan Roberts. That's right, WFAN in New York had some controversial comments. We asked him about them. We asked him about the mercenary piece of crap term he used on Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer. We also asked him about a couple of months ago, the Rays are off to one of the most unbelievable starts in baseball history, and he accused them of cheating because there was no way in heck the Rays could be doing this with the type of players they have, even though they do it every year. So we asked Evan about that, and he graciously answered all our questions. So we will ask him about all those questions when he comes on in the third segment. So that's definitely an interview you don't want to miss. Tell you what, folks, we're going to go ahead. Take a break. And when we come back, we're going to have the great Leigh Steinberg. We'll be back right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Larry Frank from Frankly Speaking Sports, coming to you live from Hopkinsville, Kentucky. Are you a professional tattoo artist? If you are, I have good news for you. 13 Daggers Tattoo, located at the Fort Campbell Army Post in Clarksville, Tennessee, is now looking for professional tattoo artists. If you're a professional tattoo artist and you are looking for work, make sure to contact 13 Daggers Tattoo in Clarksville, Tennessee.
We love sports.
Joe Louis, the greatest boxer ever lived.
Not only do we love sports, but we love to debate sports.
He was bad in Captain Clay. He bad in Sugar Ray. He bad in that. Who that? The new boy has Mike Tyson. Look like a bulldog. He bad at him too. He done whipped Mike Tyson there. He whipped all their ass.
For the best sports analysis in the triad.
What about Rocky Marciano?
In-depth local coverage of your favorite schools and teams.
Let me tell you something wonderful. Rocky Marciano was good. But compared to Joe Louis, Rocky Marciano ain't.
And of course, the best sports debate in the triad.
Beat Joe Louis's ass.
Welcome to Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
Joe Louis was 75 years old when he fought.
You're welcome.
I don't know how old he was, but got it out.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking Baseball here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. And it is a great honor, thrill, and pleasure to have with us today legendary sports agent. He's deals with many different climates in the NFL, such as Patrick Mahomes, Troy Aikman, Drew Bledsoe, Steve Young, just to name a few. And we're happy to have him here today. Let's welcome in Leigh Steinberg. Leigh, how you doing today, sir?
Just doing fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Leigh, I always wanted to ask you this question. Growing up, I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I know you've been doing this. You've been a sports agent now, for 50 years, as far as I know. Is there any difference when you negotiate contracts from sport to sport? In other words, is an MLB contract different in retrospect to a NBA contract or an MLB contract or an NHL contract in the way you go about doing it?
Yes, because there are very different systems in each sport. So, for example, the NFL now has a rookie salary cap, which means that the old days of negotiating where players were out of camp don't happen anymore. The teams have a maximum or minimum they can pay a draftee, and they always go to the maximum, so there's very little negotiation going on. That same baseball player is signed to a contract coming out of college or high school that is freely negotiated with no limits, but it usually involves just a signing bonus. Then in baseball, for the first 4 years, a player can be signed to the minimum, and as long as the team pays him that, that's why Mike Trout was hitting .340 one year and he was making $700,000. Then they have salary arbitration years 4 through 6, and the team submits a number, the player submits a number, and then the arbitrator has to choose between them. Then after that, they have free agency, and all bets are off. So those are different systems, and each one is different. Now, basketball has a rookie salary cap also, and is a cap sport. Baseball isn't capped, but it has a luxury tax. And so very different systems. So it's all about how much freedom a player has when he's negotiating, and different sports, different systems.
Now, is there a reason, Leigh, and I'm just curious why you pretty much, and I know you're an agent in all sports, but it seems like you have a lot more football clients than you do any other sport.
Well, it evolved that way, and the truth is that I've been representing baseball players since the 70s, and then along with Jeff Morat, we had 60-something baseball players. We had Pudge Rodriguez and Will Clark and Manny Ramirez and CC Sabathia. But Jeff wanted to own a baseball team, so he left the practice and ultimately owned the San Diego Padres. But I grew up loving baseball, rooting for the Dodgers and the Angels here in Southern California. And then we did some basketball. I did boxing with Lennox Lewis and Oscar De La Hoya. And but football right now dominates America. And 80 of the top 100 Nielsen-rated television shows last year were NFL football. So representing those quarterbacks, they've become today's leading man. And the sport's not only the most popular sport, it's the most popular television show.
Right, exactly. So let me ask you this, Leigh. I think the story is fabulous how you got started when you were at UCLA, and I read some research on how you got started and everything because I was very intrigued by it. And what was it at the beginning? Obviously, you're well known now. Obviously 50 years under your belt. But what was it at the beginning? How did you go about selling yourself? What was the difference between signing on with Leigh Steinberg or signing on with another agent?
So I had a philosophy that athletes could serve as role models and retrace their roots and go back to the high school community and set up a scholarship or Boys and Girls Club or work with the church, go to the college community and bond with the alums, maybe a scholarship fund, and at the pro level, set up a charitable foundation with leading business figures, political figures, community leaders, and execute a program. So Warwick Dunn, for example, who played football for Tampa and Atlanta, just put the 200 single mother into the first home of her own. But so that I was looking for a certain type of player who was a self-starter, high character. But the way it began, I was a dorm counselor in an undergrad dormitory going to law school at UC Berkeley. And they moved the freshman football team as a dorm, and one of the students was Steve Bartkowski. And in 1975, he became the very first player drafted overall in the NFL draft by the Falcons. And he asked me to represent him. Well, I had gotten out of law school in '73 and just traveled for a year. And the draft that year was in January. And we ended up with the largest rookie contract in NFL history because there was a World Football League competing against the NFL, so that was leverage. And that's how it all began. So I started with the first player overall and the biggest contract.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt at all, does it? Well, let me ask you this. Obviously, things have changed over the time since you started. There's no doubt about that. But besides the dollars amount, what are some of the major differences that you have to deal with today negotiating for an athlete than you had to be, 50 years ago?
Well, first of all, the revenue is not even in the same ballpark.
Right.
In television, when I started, was $2 million per team per season. Last year in the NFL, it's $200 million per team, and it'll go all the way up over $300 million. And new stadia and jumbo scoreboards and naming rights and fantasy sports and all these revenue sources have sports flush with economics. One of the big changes has been the advent of social media. And so you've got players branding themselves and marketing themselves on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. So they're communicating directly. We had a major shift in our whole business occurred in the summer of 2021, which is NILs. 2022 NILs. So for the first time, any young player, instead of being an amateur until they get drafted into the pros, can go make endorsement deals, and they can hire a marketing agent to help them. So now all of a sudden you have high school kids, the next great quarterback, already branding and doing deals, and they can make money as undergrads. So that's a completely different system, and you have alums forming collectives for various schools, and they pool their money, and they're now using that in recruiting players, high school to college, and in transfer portal, getting players to switch school. But it would mean that I used to talk to players when they were about to become juniors in football, and now all of a sudden, there's a hospital over here, and there are probably agents gathering around maternity wards looking for big, healthy mothers.
Yeah, so what is your view? I mean, you're mentioning about NIL, and obviously it's taken over college athletics, and even under that in the high school level. As an agent, like yourself, an experienced agent, what is your overall opinion about NIL? And I know, like you said, it's definitely changed the way an agent does their job now.
Well, it moves up the time of contact with a player. So let's take the 2024 NFL draft. In the old days, the old days, 2 years ago, you might have waited until that player becomes a junior to talk to his parents or talk to him about representation. Now, all of a sudden, as a high school senior, he's thinking about that. So it moves the age up earlier. Since the NCAA rules were put into effect to prevent recruiting violations and money being part of it, well, you can forget about all that because now some of the major colleges who are in the super conferences have such a competitive advantage in terms of players. I think you'll see a day where you have like 5 super conferences and they're playing at one level, and all the rest of college sports is at an entirely different level. That I don't love.
Right. And I agree with you 100% on that. So let me ask you this. We're talking to Leigh Steinberg, legendary sports agent, via the phone here. Leigh, I ask you this question because we're at a time where it seems like, and as you're mentioning, kids are younger and younger and getting more involved with agents at such a young age. How much involvement should and I want to go as far as back as high school, should high schools, maybe junior, senior grades, and colleges have in talking about financial, maybe the right word's financial literacy, and talking about, because, we have things in our junior and senior years way back in high school that we never use today in everyday life. How much better would it be if they taught some financial aspects of what to expect in case they do go on, not just for athletes, but probably for any profession?
Well, think about it. None of us coming out of college knew very much about a financial plan or taxation or investments. And to their credit, the colleges at many schools now are coming out with life preparation type courses that they have the athletes take. And one of the big subjects is financial literacy. So that, and whether that young collegiate player, most of them won't play pro sports, so it's preparing them for life. But, and then having the parents involved when they're picking a financial planner so that they get connected with someone who's ethical and principled and will guide them correctly. So the old stereotype of the player, everyone ending up bankrupt and losing all their money, that's not really accurate anymore. The brighter players, or I should say the better protected players who have parents or family attorneys or someone involved as they start to think about the concept later, they end up with very good financial planners, and they end up financially successful in the second career. They don't think that the rate at which they're being paid as pros is going to last forever. They do understand that they can't support a village. They never give power of attorney away to a financial planner. And so there are all those courses. And then the Players Associations give financial literacy courses, and the leagues themselves give financial literacy courses. So we can always improve, but it's much better.
Leigh, I know we're switching sports here, but I want to go to, I think the NBA might be the best example of this. And I think maybe Tom Brady with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the last few years in the NFL. But do star players have too much say in your mind in what a team front office does when it relates to them picking up players, not getting players, trading for players? We hear about these super teams in the NBA. That's the best example I have of that.
Well, this has always gone on quietly in sports. So, for example, where I would have a quarterback, I would have an open relationship, usually with management, or to have the player directly communicate. The teams would be crazy not to ask a incumbent player about what he knows about a college player or another pro player or what he thinks the team needs are. So that goes on. That's different than a player trying to control his own destiny. And it's very hard to do in football. You don't see it all that much.
Right.
I mean, you saw Aaron Rodgers or someone else, but it's very difficult to do because free agency doesn't operate to allow the superstars in that sport of football to become free agents. They get preemptively signed before their contracts are ever up to long-term contracts. They're not available. In basketball, the systems evolve so players come to free agency in their prime. And they're out and free and available and their contracts are up and they can and there's only 5 starting players. So that a player that recruits other vets for his own team or decides he's making a free agency decision by talking to 2 other players can really have an impact. And that doesn't happen very much in the other sports. It's pretty basketball specific.
Yeah, and last question. I know we're running out of time here, Leigh. I wanted to definitely ask you this. Sports betting, it's been getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger in our society. Most states are starting to allow it. You know, I'm not going to say I'm a big fan of it. Only I know it makes money, but I don't like the negative aspect it could have on a bad athlete, if you understand what I mean. So my question to you is sports betting in relationships to athletes a good thing or is it a bad thing?
It's a totally destructive thing if you're talking about players ever placing wagers, because the whole concept of our following sports is we think the games are played on an even playing field. Everyone's trying as hard as they can. You hear these talks about tanking and you hear talks about, players doing the players are really competitive. So they're always trying as hard as they can. And if you ever thought a player with gambling debts or has a temptation to shave their performance or alter the outcome of a game, it would be the end of professional sports and it would greatly hamper collegiate sports. So the problem is that for years, the underbelly of all the sports was the fact that lots of people are gambling on it. And now that just became the leagues made a complete diametrical turn from the NFL being absolutely paranoid about any relationship to betting to having, the Las Vegas Raiders there in Las Vegas having advertising for casinos and owning part of the gambling apps. And so, I predict you'll see a time where you walk into the local stadium and you can use your phone, but if you want to, you can walk up just like at a racetrack and make a pari-mutuel bet on, who's going to hit the first single or who will score first or hundreds of different bets. That's just here. But the impregnable wall between athletes and any involvement in that has to be maintained.
Yeah. Well, listen, my friend, I know we ran out of time here. I could talk to you all day. Want to thank you very, very much taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule of yours to join us on Frankly Speaking Baseball today.
Enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye. All right. That was the great Leigh Steinberg, legendary sports agent. We'll be back right after this.
Here at Tobacco Road Sports Radio, we ask the tough questions.
Hey, you got any left-handed footballs?
We're never afraid to tell you how we feel.
Come on, we look like the damn bad news bears.
We'll debate sports. We'll debate anything.
Man, you lying. You ain't never met Martin Luther King. Knocked the wind out of me. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. No, he did not.
No matter what, Tobacco Road Sports Radio has you covered.
I'm going to come right back at him. Soldier.
You're listening to Tobacco Road Sports Radio.
13 Daggers Tattoo Studio is looking for a new tattoo artist. Must be established with a strong portfolio and good work ethic. Stop by today at 13 Daggers across from Patriot Park on Fort Campbell Boulevard. Clarksville's ultimate tattoo studio. Tattoos, touch-ups, and consultations. See the artist's work online at 13daggerstattoo.com and get the custom experience you want with killer ink. Book today and get pricked by a pro. 13 Daggers Tattoo Studio. Working hard on the Boulevard.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Baseball right here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. What a show we had. Just had the great Leigh Steinberg. What a great interview we had with him. And, we talked earlier in the show about some of the teams in Major League Baseball and some of the more disappointing teams that we didn't really expect to be where they are at today. And one of those teams happened to be the New York Mets in the National League East. They're playing terrible baseball right now after winning 101 games last year. So it is a great honor, thrill, and pleasure to now bring into you on-air sports personality from WFAN in New York. Let's bring in Evan Roberts. Evan, how you doing, buddy?
I'm depressed because you reminded me that the Mets won 101 games last year, and they are far, far cry from that right now.
Let me ask you this, Evan, because and we're going to mainly talk about the Mets today, but I have to ask you this. I grew up in Long Island, lived there the first 13 years of my life, grew up a huge Met fans in the 70s, with Steve and Madlack and Kuzman and all the great pitches they had back then. How disappointing is the city? Not when you just have the Mets not playing well, but on the opposite side of the Bronx, from Flushing, you don't have the Yankees playing well either.
I think you could argue this has been, for both teams, if you combine it, one of the most disappointing baseball seasons of recent memory, because last year the Yankees got off to a start that almost reminded you of the 98 Yankees. They obviously cooled off. They won the division. We all know what happened. They lost in the ALCS. The Mets went 101 games. So we had this incredible summer last year where we're dreaming of Subway World Series, where there wasn't that much stress because both teams eventually cruised to playoff spots despite the Mets not winning the division. This year, the expectations were the same. The expectations were both teams at minimum are postseason teams. And here we sit in the middle of June. The Yankees are obviously in a better playoff spot right now, but they're struggling without Aaron Judge. The Mets are a mess. And I think when you look at both teams, not just one, because the Mets have had individually disappointing seasons, as have the Yankees, but when you combine the expectations we had for both, to have them where they are now, it has to be one of the more disappointing seasons we've ever seen from both teams combined. And I don't know if it's getting any better.
And we mentioned earlier, and I made you depressed, I'm sorry, by talking about 100 wins last year, 101 wins. What has been the biggest difference that you see from last year's Mets team to this? I mean, obviously wins, but besides wins, what's been the biggest difference year over year?
So everything has been worse, but to pick one, it would be the starting pitching. Because a year ago, when you look at the way Chris Bassett pitched, the way Taijuan Walker pitched, the way Max Scherzer pitched when he was healthy, and then all the fill-ins that they used. David Peterson is a forgotten-about guy, but he pitched well filling in last year when the Mets had injuries. Their starting pitching was very good a year ago, and this year, it is horrific. Max Scherzer's had a bad year. Verlander misses a month. He comes back. He's been up and down. Carlos Carrasco, who was solid last year, has a 6.5 ERA. It's everything to go from being a 101-win team to 5 games under 500. Like, their defense is worse, their offense is worse, the manager's worse. It's literally everything. But the number one culprit to me has to be their starting pitching.
Which player? I mean, we got a lot of players. I mean, I know a lot of people talk different. They talk Beatty, I've heard, Vogelbach. In my eyes, I still say Lindor, but I'd love to get your opinion on which player has been the most disappointing that you expected to really do well and just has not lived up to it.
I mean, there are so many. I mean, I'm not even joking. Like, Starling Marte has gone backwards. Jeff McNeil goes from winning a batting title to hitting the softest 275 you'll see. You mentioned Lindor. Lindor, oddly enough, I thought, over the first month and a half of the year, despite a very low batting average, was driving in a ton of runs, was hitting a lot of home runs and seemed to be clutch. Over the last, I'd say it's about 3.5 weeks, it's gone completely backwards backwards for Lindor. So it's so depressing to say this. It's a little bit of everybody. I mean, literally everybody has gone backwards. And I think that's how you go from being a team that was a 101 win team to this. Maybe Max Scherzer's my answer, because despite his age, I figure if Max is out there taking the baseball every 5 days, he's going to be solid. And, he had the whole incident in LA where he gets suspended for sticky stuff. He comes back. He has an awful start. He puts together a couple of good starts in a row. And then in the two biggest starts of the year, in Atlanta against the Braves when they give him an early lead, against the Yankees where they give him a lead, he gives it all back. So, boy, I could pick one of about 10 guys, but to me, Max Scherzer may be their biggest disappointment this season.
And, you got frustrated like all Met fans. I mean, we're all fans, we understand that. And, sometimes things are taken out of context. And it was said, and you know what I'm talking about. You had made the comment about mercenary pieces of crap between two Hall of Fame pitchers that are going to go in the Hall of Fame, Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. Was that taken out of context? Were you talking more about their performance and not attacking their character?
Of course. Now, I got a little emotional, I must admit. I think I recorded – that was a podcast I did called Rico Bronya, where I do a Met podcast along with the show I do on air. And it was right after they got swept by the Braves, right after Verlander had his awful performance. So, what they are Hall of Famers. I'm going to make very clear. Max Scherzer is the first ballot Hall of Famer. Justin Verlander is the first ballot Hall of Famer. I know that. I respect that. As New York Mets, they are mercenaries, okay? They came here because they paid a lot of money, and they're supposed to help us win a championship. As Mets, they have been awful. Some may say they've pitched like crap, okay? That's what I was saying, and that's the way it's been going. I mean, they've pitched badly, and Scherzer more so than Verlander, only because Max has been here a year longer.
Right.
And in the biggest moments, in Atlanta last year, final weekend of the year, against the Padres, game one of the wild card series, he's come up very small. That's the reality. It doesn't take away from the fact that the guy's going to go to the Hall of Fame. That's great. He's certainly not going to wear a Met hat. We know that. He ain't going down as a Met. He's been a massive disappointment as a Met, as has Verlander, though Justin's got a little bit more time because he's only made a handful of starts as a Met. But they are here to win. They are here to pitch well. And both guys, to varying degrees, have not. And I would love to eat my words. I would love to be in a parade with those mercenaries. But right now, they have been, I'll try to be nicer, they've been bad.
But they both do have the ability, from what we've seen, to come back the second half of the year and make a difference.
I hope so, because really the only hope the Mets have is for that to occur, is for Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander to figure it out. Because all those other things we're talking about of guys having disappointing seasons, I don't think it matters if they turn it around, but the two aces don't. Like, they need Scherzer and Verlander to be at least close to what they were supposed to be. And all we can do is hope. Like, there's no change that's coming. There's no magic trade that's coming. Like, both of those guys need to be better. And I think the concern I'm going to have, the concern a lot of us are going to have, is that they're older. And at some point, Father Time wins. Like, there's just a time where you're not what you used to be. And clearly my fear, and it was a fair concern even when they signed them, is that are you getting these guys at the back end of their careers? Randy Johnson is an all-time great pitcher. The Yankees acquired him at the back end of his career. Tom Glavine is an all-time great pitcher. The Mets acquired him at the back end of their careers. No one thinks of Glavine as a Met and Randy Johnson as a Yankee. And the hope is Scherzer and Verlander are now that.
Well, I already said this, and that's, you mentioned Johnson, a great example too, is that you pay players for what they've previously done with hope that they'll do the same thing. So, it's the weird thing about baseball is we're paying people based on what they did in another town, saying, okay, come to New York and do the same thing. And that's not always the case. But I have to ask you before we get back to the Mets. I lived in Tampa Bay for 32 years after New York. Earlier in the season, you had made a comment that you thought the Rays were cheating because, here's the best team in the league, the second offensively, defensively, pitching, doing everything right. They have, 8 players with double-figure home runs already. You've got to see them play recently. I don't know if you were there, but when they were in the Bronx, this is a good, solid all-around baseball team, yet Evan Roberts made the comment is they have to be cheating.
No, well, hold on. So let's be fair. I never said they were cheating. I just was merely asking some questions. I was looking at journeyman players who have overperformed and saying, wow, this is peculiar. Now, some may have taken that as I'm calling them cheaters. I did not. I never used those words. I was merely wondering aloud about how they're pulling this off. And to their credit, they are an organization that seems to overperform every single year. And they're going to hold
the lowest payroll, right?
They do it with the lowest payroll imaginable, with guys who are thrown aside from other organizations. So I was just marveling, I guess would be the word, at how amazing it had been, how all of these guys, or a lot of these guys, because they do have some good talent on this team that I have major respect for, like Wander Franco, Arozarena, McClanahan, maybe the best pitcher in baseball. I acknowledge that. But there were a lot of journeymen having outstanding seasons, and some of them have cooled off. Mr. Walls has cooled off.
He has cooled. You know, what is he batting? 211 now. But he has 7 homers, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and he was a guy, you know, that they didn't know if they'd even get a chance to play him because he played shortstop in the minor league, and so did Franco. So, you know, and it goes to answer, we talk about the Rays and how great their front office is. And I got to ask you this question because I reported this a couple of months ago. Well, it was a question. And then it came out a couple of weeks later. I don't know what paper it was in New York, and I'm going to ask you the question because you're around the situation more than I am. Who's making the on-field decisions in New York with the Mets? Is it Buck Showalter or is it Epier?
I think it's Buck Showalter. I think that Billy Epler and the front office certainly give information to the manager, maybe more information than ever before. It's not 25 years ago. Certainly Buck is collecting more information than he did maybe in 1995 when he's putting the Yankee lineup together. But ultimately, it's him. And so one of the frustrations Met fans have had, I've certainly had, is their handling of certain young players, specifically Mark Vientos. You call a kid up who'd been tearing up AAA, and you expect him to play and get a full opportunity. And while he wasn't great in the limited chances he got, it almost seemed unfair to him. And to me, that fell at the feet of Buck Showalter. He is the manager. He is the man who puts the lineup together. He is the man who decides, hey, I'm going to use David Robertson in this inning, and I'm going to use Adam Ottavino in that inning. So I think that because of this age we live in, and there are some organizations where the front office may dictate lineups, I don't deny that, that's not happening here. So I think the frustrations that any of us have should be at Buck. In terms of the lineup, in terms of the roster construction, of course, then Billy Epler's fair game. And I think a part of why the Mets finally sent Vientos down is because they realized we're wasting him away at the major league level when he's not getting a consistent chance to play. So I put those decisions on Buck Showalter.
How do you like Francisco Alvarez?
He's been great, especially defensively. Like the home run numbers will jump out at you, but one thing we had always read about Alvarez, because we don't have the ability to sit here and watch every minor league game, even though MLB app now makes it available, which is great. I can't sit there. I watch enough Met Yankee games. It's very difficult to watch, the Syracuse Binghamton games. But I'd always read about Alvarez. He's got a lot of work to do defensively. Well, I've watched him at the major league level for a few months, and his pitch framing is outstanding. His control on the mound, too, when he calls timeout and puts his arm around a veteran pitcher like David Robertson in a big moment. Like, he has shown a lot of confidence in his ability, and he's young. He's a baby. Obviously, the offense speaks for itself. He has shown a great amount of power. He's gone through batting slumps, but I think there's a confidence he's going to be able to be maybe a 30 home run hitter. And being a catcher who supplies that kind of power is incredible. But I think his defense has been the most impressive thing I've seen. And he plays just about every day, and he should. And I think he's hit well enough where now he's even in the DH mix when he does get a day where he's not catching behind the plate. But Alvarez has been fun to watch. He's one of the few positives in this dreadful Mets season that they have young pieces that are going to help now and certainly help in the future.
Talking to Evan Roberts on air, sports personality at WFA in New York. A couple more questions we'll let you run. We know you got a show coming up soon. Evan, let me ask you this. You hear a lot of excuses and you take them with a grain of salt. And it was terrible what happened to Diaz before the season started in the World Baseball Classic. But as you watch this Mets team unfold, yes, he's a big part of the team. But he's not the reason they're losing, because David Robinson hasn't really done a terrible job in the bullpen, has he?
He's been great. He's not the reason they're losing. Are they better if Edwin Diaz is there? Absolutely. Like, look at Sunday's game. The Mets play a game against the Cardinals. They're down 5-1. They're down 7-5. They come back, they tie the game. Great. It's 7-7. They use Adam Ottavino in the 9th inning of a tie game with Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado coming up. Adam Ottavino gives up a home run to Arenado. Mets lose the game. If Edwin Diaz is healthy, Edwin Diaz is pitching the 9th inning. So you just have a bullpen that's deeper. So do the Mets win Sunday's game against the Cardinals if Edwin Diaz is healthy and on this team? Maybe. I mean, there's no guarantee. Doesn't mean the Mets score a run, but it means that when you have a deeper bullpen, you give yourself more cracks at winning a game. You look at the leads they blew in Atlanta against the Braves. If Edwin Diaz is there, does it help? Of course. So I can't tell you the exact number of games. Maybe the Mets win more than they have right now. But it's not the reason they're 5 games under 500. Are they better if Diaz is out there? Of course. I mean, yeah, they have a deeper bullpen. It's not just about, hey, Robertson's replaced them. I think a lot of it's about you have Robertson along with Edwin Diaz. So it's a big blow, but everybody deals with injuries. The Atlanta Braves won a World Series without Acuna. I mean, the Cardinals a decade ago won their World Series without Adam Wainwright back in 2011 specifically, not 06, as we know. So no excuse. No excuse.
All right, last question. I'll let you run, Evan. Does this team still have a chance to bounce back, get in at least the wild card, and then make some noise in the playoffs?
They have a chance, but my confidence level is very low because we're almost at the halfway point of the season. They have not had a good stretch all season long, and I keep sitting there waiting for the hot streak to come. And I figured, okay, the Yankees without Judge, a Cardinal team that's struggling at home, 5 games, this is their chance. And they went 2-3. So every day that goes by, my confidence level, which is right now at about 25%, just dips further and further. Luckily, there's the extra wild card spots, but they got to get hot now. No more, it's early. They have to start winning games and go on a hot streak now.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I always tell people it's not the team with the best record that wins the championship. It's this team going into it that's playing the best baseball. So hopefully time will help this team out and they'll be back to respectability like they were last year. Want to take my time to just thank you so very, very much, taking time out of what I know is a busy schedule for you to join us on Frankly Speaking Baseball.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man. We'll talk when the Mets are in the World Series.
Sounds great, my friend. Have a good one. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great Evan Roberts, on-air sports personality at WFAN New York. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today. What a great, great show we had. Once again, we'll be back next week with some more great guests on Frankly Speaking Baseball.